This is Mac OS Ken.
Security things that make you go, MacBook Neo still requires patience, and Apple's hired an AI marketing exec. It is Monday, the 30th of March, 2026. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by NordLayer. Secure your network, block threats to your business, and save with offer code MacOSKen-10-NordLayer at nordlayer.com/MacOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. Hey parents, you know those calls you get or used to get from your kid's school? The ones that started with the words, "Everything's fine," letting you know that while there was no emergency, they were really playing a little loose with the word fine. Remember those calls? There was an interesting security story on TechCrunch late last week. According to Apple, according to TechCrunch, the Cupertino company is not aware of any successful mercenary spyware attacks against a lockdown-enabled Apple device. If you're not familiar, the security show that I used to produce, The Checklist, first covered lockdown mode on episode 287, way back in the middle of 2022. We joked then that lockdown mode works by taking the radical step of turning your smartphone into a regular phone. Protections built in included blocking most attachment types and messages other than images, also disabled some features like link previews. Certain complex web technologies were disabled unless the user put them on a sort of safe list. Incoming invitations and service requests, including FaceTime calls, were blocked if the user had not previously sent the initiator a call or a request. Wired connections with a computer or accessory were blocked when an iPhone was locked, and configuration profiles couldn't be installed and the device couldn't enroll in mobile device management while lockdown mode was turned on. Now that sounded pretty draconian at the time, or needlessly restrictive for most people. The kinds of attacks that Apple was fighting were attacks that cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop. Kind of attacks written by professional attackers like NSO Group and funded by world governments. The people targeted were thought to be opposing political figures, activists, journalists, people the more repressive might refer to or think of as enemies. In other words, not most of us. Back in 2022. Though the piece doesn't mention the posting last week of working dark sword code to GitHub, kind of feels like this has to be the reason for the TechCrunch piece. Jogging the memory on that, dark sword is a fileless hack that can access all kinds of data on an iPhone when that iPhone is unlucky enough to stumble onto an infected website. Doesn't install malware, it just quietly steals, leaving no apparent trace of its misdeeds. If your software is up to date, Apple says you're protected against dark sword. If you can't get the latest software, though, or the security updates that Apple's pushing for older operating systems, at least there's lockdown mode. To that, TechCrunch has Apple saying it's not aware of any successful mercenary spyware attacks against a lockdown mode-enabled Apple device. It has the head of the security lab at Amnesty International saying he and his colleagues have not seen any evidence of an iPhone being successfully compromised by mercenary spyware where lockdown mode was enabled at the time of the attack. And it's got Apple security expert Patrick Wardle saying, in his estimation, lockdown mode is one of the most aggressive consumer-facing hardening features ever shipped. That's because it blocks most message attachment types and restricts WebKit features, killing entire delivery mechanisms and exploit classes. I guess the question now, is lockdown mode something you need to employ? The author of the TechCrunch piece says that they've used lockdown mode for years and barely think about it, except when it pops up notifications that can be occasionally confusing. Some features that have been switched off require you to take an extra step, such as copying and pasting links from text messages to your browser. They go on to say that they and several digital security experts recommend people who are worried about being targeted by spyware or digital attacks go ahead and switch on lockdown mode. Now, nowhere in the piece do they say that more people should be worried at this point. But the statement from Apple and the story from TechCrunch, one can't help wondering at whom they were directed and why. Sort of makes you go, I mentioned security updates Apple's pushing for older operating systems a moment ago. And it looks like Apple really wants to make sure people are aware of those. Mac Rumors ran a piece late last week that had Apple pushing lock screen notifications to iPhones and iPads running older versions of iOS and iPadOS, warning users of active web-based attacks. According to the report, the alerts, which appear as a critical software notification from the Settings app, warn that Apple is aware of attacks targeting out-of-date iOS software, including the version on that device, and urging users to install a critical update to protect that device. Over the past few weeks, Apple has updated versions of iOS and iPadOS all the way back to 15.8.7. People running anything earlier than that are encouraged by the company to update to iOS 15 so they can get the latest security fixes. Users who are unable to update should consider enabling lockdown mode, according to Mac Rumors, though the piece says that only goes as far back as iOS 16. Demand for MacBook Neo still seems demanding for Apple. That said, telling you about it's pretty easy this week. Checking Apple's site in the middle of the night last night, every color, silver, blush, citrus, and indigo in both capacities, the 256GB without Touch ID and the 512GB with, showed deliveries and in-store pickup slipping another week. Last week, most models showed shipping between the 7th of April and the 14th, with in-store pickup available on the 14th. This week, they all show shipping between the 14th of April and the 21st, with in-store pickup available on the 21st of April. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, NordLayer, working to secure your network and block threats to your business. Scary as a whole new system thing might sound, it's not nearly as scary as the threats out there. Malware, ransomware, phishing attempts. Let NordLayer worry about all of that. With NordLayer, VPN, access control, and threat protection start at just $8 per user per month. No new hardware required. NordLayer protects desktops, laptops, tablets, and smartphones across multiple platforms. Additionally, they partnered with CrowdStrike to bring Falcon endpoint protection to small and mid-sized businesses. That is your business, getting enterprise-grade security that's simple to deploy and manage, all at really great rates. Though they do have a special offer for macOS Ken listeners. Get up to 22% off NordLayer yearly plans plus 10% on top with offer code macOSken-10-NordLayer at nordlayer.com/macOSken. Try it risk-free with their 14-day money-back guarantee. NordLayer, toggle-ready network security built for your business. Get savings on top of savings with offer code macOSken-10-NordLayer at nordlayer.com/macOSken. So I guess Apple thinks it really has something coming in AI this time. A piece from Axios says the Cupertino company's hired a real-live marketing exec specifically for the artificial intelligence push. Lillian Rincon, former VP of Product for Google Shopping, is coming aboard as Apple's VP of Product Marketing for AI. She'll answer to Apple's Senior VP of Worldwide Marketing, Greg Joswick. Hey, I'm sorry to second guess, but I didn't even know that Google Shopping was a thing. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that it's a thing, but Apple just hired a marketing person who was the marketing person for a thing that I didn't even know was a thing. Then again, if I did a Google Focus show, maybe I would have known. Anyway, expect to hear rumors about what's in store for Apple and AI until the company announces something concrete. Expect Apple to announce something concrete at WWDC 2026. Expect that to kick off on the 8th of June, mostly because Apple said that's when it's happening. If you're a Crunchroll watcher and an Apple TV user, the app or the device, your viewing experience is about to get more cohesive. Engadget says the anime streaming service is now available as a channel in the Apple TV app. That means you can sign up for and view the content without needing to log in elsewhere and without having to download or use an additional app. Of course, if you already have and use both, you should be able to add it as a channel in the Apple TV app, the way you can with HBO Max, Disney Plus, Peacock, and on that list goes. And finally today, something highbrow for the computer that rests on your brow. 9 to 5 Mac says the BBC has made a full Proms concert available for Apple Vision Pro. The Beeb bills Proms as the world's greatest classical music festival. The presentation features Austrian pianist Lukas Sterna's performance of Edvard Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor alongside the BBC Symphony Orchestra. Even if classical isn't your jam, this thing sounds pretty cool. The BBC's description says, filmed at the iconic Royal Albert Hall during the 2025 Proms season, the experience brings viewers onto the stage and into the heart of the orchestra. Audiences can watch the performance just inches away from the pianist's hands, surrounded by the full force of the orchestra in spatial audio and immersed in the grandeur of one of the world's most historic concert venues. The presentation's a little over half an hour in length. If you have access to an Apple Vision Pro and want to give the concert a go, you're looking for Debut at the BBC Proms in the Apple TV app on the headset. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by NordLayer, toggle-ready network security built for your business. Get savings on top of savings with offer code macOSKen-10-NordLayer at nordlayer.com/macOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can find me on Mastodon, macOSKen at mastodon.social. You can also send me an email, info@macOSKen.com. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.